I'm Nina Fiore. I'm the founding director of the Astoria Film Festival here in Astoria, New York. And basically we, I tried to combine my background in television and digital production with my background in education. So a lot of what we do is around education and outreach for emerging filmmakers, for youth who are interested in filmmaking, especially for underserved youth who don't get represented as much as they should, to try to help them break into the industry, or at least give them something to put on their resume and experience. So part of that is helping them understand what jobs there are out there. So that's why we're doing this. So I really appreciate. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a dark-haired white woman with glasses and a pink shirt standing in front of an Astoria Film Festival banner. Mike, would you like to go next? And if you guys can go around and just introduce yourselves and give us your pronouns.
Yeah, my name is Mike Hayhurst, he, him, and I am primarily a director, but also through my company, Evening Squire Productions, freelance as an editor, producer, across film, video, theatre, kind of all sorts, really. Yeah.
Great.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. Okay, I'm Mark Stolzenberg. I'm the CEO of Circle of Life Films, NYC. We're a cutting edge indie film production company. I'm also the owner of the New York Acting School for Film and Television, where I've been teaching for about 20 years. It's my own little baby that I started for film acting.
That's wonderful. And you also teach at the New School as well, don't you?
And I'm also actually an associate professor at the New School in the drama department. So I've got a lot of plates spinning.
Yes, absolutely. Geneva?
Hi, my name is Geneva Peshka. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a director, documentaries, commercials, branded content, and I think like all around creative, very curious person. I have held various jobs in production. More recently, I was the director of storytelling at an agency, and I'm a freelance director. I am of mixed background, white and black. I have curly hair, it's brown, a little past my shoulders, a gray turtleneck, and in the background, there's a performance photo of the Tribe Called Quest at a concert, one of my favorites, and a plant as well in the background with a white wall.
Very cool. Sharif?
Hi, my name is Sharif Sadek. I'm an editor and a filmmaker, director, and more recently, over the past few years, I've been a post-production sales engineer at B&H. I work at a division called the Studio, the high-end professional division at B&H. You can see some of the cameras.
Yeah, the great background.
Yeah, so I am in the studio right now in the corner of 33rd and 9th. And I've pretty much worked at all the post-production houses here in New York for the past 20 years. Technicolor, Postworks, Post Factory, Nutmeg. And for a large part of my career, I was in engineering, post-production engineering, which is a not very fancy job. Basically, our job is to fix when your movie is not going well, whether the computer crashes or the network or things like that. One of the things that I noticed in the last 20 years that filmmaking has really become a computer-centric medium. When I started 20 years ago, we used to transfer film to tape, and 35 millimeter film to tape, and now everything is just file-based and digital. So it was a very interesting transition. I just want to say one thing about that, which is the transition from film to tape to digital happened around the time of the tsunami in Japan that had made buying tape, digibeta tape and HD cam tape extremely expensive, and the industry moved pretty much overnight to digital and file-based. We're kind of seeing the same thing with COVID and virtual production and remote production. We basically had there was a trend towards that, and then one day we woke up and it was like, well,
COVID
we
was
have to do this.
the
Yeah,
viral
COVID was
tsunami,
here.
if you will.
And we had to move into virtual production overnight.
Very cool. Jaime?
Those guys. Hi, my name is Jaime Ceballos. I'm mainly a professional working union actor. I am also a screenwriter. I've optioned a couple of screenplays recently, and I recently got involved in producing films the last like 3-4 years. So I'm kind of juggling all that right now. And
lots going on.
I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I'll probably be walking around a lot because I can't stay in one spot. So my background will always change.
That's
I have
like,
too much energy to sit.
yes. Well, it's good. That's good for students watching who are getting like attacked daily for having that behavior. It's like it can be useful later on. Like being sitting still is never like I always wonder why sitting still is so important.
Yeah, sitting is overrated.
It totally is overrated. Chung Gee?
Yes, hi, my name is Chung Gee. I am a New York-based documentary filmmaker and a freelance videographer. I was born and raised in South Korea, and then came to the States around 2010, and unfortunately I had to go back to my country and spend about like 4 years, and then have to come back again in 2015. And then I went to SUNY Buffalo and studied filmmaking, and then came down to the city around 2018. And then that was the starting point of my filmmaking journey.
So I guess based off that, the first question I have for you guys is, how did you kind of decide you wanted to do this career, or did it pick you, or kind of what was your trajectory towards your current position, or like how did you decide you wanted to enter filmmaking or producing, directing? So if you can start with Chung Gee.
Sure. So like ever since I was young, I always wanted to become a filmmaker. But I had no idea like what the filmmaking was like. So the only thing I know was the Hollywood, and Hollywood was in the US, and I wanted to go there, although I had no idea how to get there.
Did you ever foresee Korea becoming the like mega production house that it is today? I mean, it's all the rage at the moment, right?
Well, yeah, the film industries in Korea had like a huge development, especially in past like 10 or 20 years. So when I was young, the film industry was very poor, and there were lack of money, and then many people in the industry were not making enough money to survive. So
yeah.
Nobody agreed with me that becoming a filmmaker.
Right.
So at first I wanted to make like narrative films. I still do, but nowadays I make documentaries. I would say that just happened because documentaries doesn't require like a lot of money, a lot of people's, a lot of efforts compared to narrative productions.
You can do more of it on your own if need be, like if you're really. And by the way, Chung Gee's documentary won Best Documentary Short in 2020 at our festival.
Oh, nice.
It's wonderful. It's about kind of an issue between Korea and Japan surrounding World War II. And part of it was filmed in Korea, part of it was filmed here, correct?
Correct, yes. Speaking more about that documentaries, well, you know what, actually, I'll talk about it a little bit later.
Okay. You're like, no, I'm done.
So yes, documentary making, you can do it with the one camera and a subject. You can do it just whenever you can. So But that doesn't mean I don't like making documentaries. I really do like documentaries in general, and I do enjoy making it. But eventually, I am planning to like make narratives like a feature-length one.
So you're working on it.
Yes.
Cool. Mark, do you want to talk
Yeah,
about kind of what
sure.
got you into the business?
Sure. One of these days I'm going to write my memoirs, I think.
Yes.
But so I'll just give you a sort of linear kind of description of how
yeah,
my
it's like
life
where do you
went.
start? I know
Yeah, where do you start?
you've been on, you were on Boardwalk Empire, you were on Bull, you
Right.
were on All My Children, which I grew up watching with my
Right.
mom.
Right. Well, so I started, I was a speech and theater major at in college, and then I got a full fellowship to New York University graduate school, and right in the middle of it, I got accepted to clown college, Ringling Brothers Clown College, and I
Wow.
gave up my fellowship to NYU, and I became a clown in the circus.
I'm sure NYU doesn't want to hear that.
My
But
parents.
Clown College is much more competitive than most other existing colleges, no?
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, my parents were thrilled, needless to say. So, but I spent a year in the circus with a plan to come back to New York. Then I actually learned a tremendous amount from that experience. It was foundational to me as an artist. Just the self-aware, just all the things I learned, the self-awareness and the fun. And it was just a great experience. And then, so I ran away from the circus and I joined New York City. I came back to New York, and I started doing all kinds of things in New York to make a living. I developed a circus act. I do unicycling and juggling. I still do.
Oh, wow.
And I came in 5th in the world in a international circus competition,
Wow.
actually. And I've been on David Letterman about 3 or 4 times doing my act.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So that's always been a kind of part of my life, and a way for me, my waitress job. When things are slow, I always have my unicycle.
Right.
But it's all performing. I've always made a living as a performing artist, which I'm proud of. I never had to like drive a cab or work in a restaurant or an office. So I'm very proud of that. So when I came back to New York, and one thing that I believe clowning taught me was to be like a self-contained show. You'd create everything yourself,
yes.
The script, the character, the venue, everything. That's what we do as circus, as clowns. And I started doing that as an actor. I did I produced off-Broadway shows and wrote my own scripts, and was auditioning for things. I did a lot of things, like All My Children and I was auditioning and working as an actor as well, freelancing around, and I did stand-up comedy for about 15 years, which I loved. At some point, there was an audition for a feature film in New York. They were doing a talent search, and they saw 2,000 people for the lead role in this film. I auditioned and I got the part. So, and then when I did this movie, that was like, I won't tell you when it was a while ago, but I got hooked, basically. Got hooked on film acting, and the whole process of filmmaking. I just fell in love with the whole thing. So, and ever since, that film was called Luggage of the Gods, and the person who wrote and directed it went on to write and produce Growing Pains for NBC.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And now he's doing like all sorts of Disney movies, all kinds of things. So that was a great experience, and that kind of launched me as a film person. And so I started very voraciously auditioning for movies and TV and et cetera, et cetera. And I started teaching acting at the New School, and I got really into film acting and that whole process, and started making all my own little short films. I've made about 40 short films.
Wow.
And
one of your films won our best comedy this year at the festival.
Yes.
Which was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So it's just been a whirlwind, and I write screenplays. I was a finalist with the Sundance Institute Screenwriters Lab, and I optioned 3 screenplays.
Jaime, what kind of got you into the industry?
Geez.
You met with Michael Eisner at some point randomly, I read, right?
Oh yeah, that was very random. That was when I first moved to LA.
Like, what did you bump into him at a cafe? Is it one of those like 1950s stories where
No, no, like my career has always been like very weird because like, you know, I didn't go to like Yale or even aspire to be an actor or even aspire to do movies. I never really had an aspiration for being in the theater or film industry. But I was an artist. I was a graffiti artist from the age like, I think 12 to like
oh wow
18. That's all I did. I'd be one of those guys like, you know, I got really good. So I went from like what we call in like the graffiti world, just like kind of like tagging your name or bombing your name all over the place.
I grew up in Queens, dude. I understand.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Okay, so I got really infamous for that. And then around the time I think Giuliani was going to propose an felony for for graffiti, and that's when I was like
all out on that stuff.
He went all out, right? And so I was like, I got to do something with myself. And I actually went to high school for a little while in Astoria. I went to Bryant.
Oh, no way. We work with Bryant. They're one of the schools we do programs with interns.
Is there high school kids? You said there's high school kids listening to this?
There are high school kids. Also, we have
That's awesome.
Some high school kids who are moderating this for us on the back end. I tried to get them to come forward and co-host with me, but he's shy. So.
That's amazing. I was a really poor high school student. Like I went to like 7 different high schools. So, you know, so maybe I would do it all different, but just no, long story short, I got really good at like painting, and I started, some people were approaching me to do like storefronts in the village. And I was approached to do a theater, a background for like an off-Broadway play, like off Broadway.
Yeah.
And I did a backdrop, like a city backdrop for them. I was probably like 18 at the time, maybe 19. And I wasn't in college. I was like doing like odd jobs or whatever. And I saw what they were doing on stage and I found it really fun. And I thought that could be easy if I could make a living doing that. Because I wasn't in college at the time and I didn't know what I was gonna do. And so I was working like I had like the craziest odd jobs. But I just thought acting would be really easy. And again, you know, ignorance is bliss. And again, it's not like one of those like I'm patting myself on the back. I just got very lucky. On Sunday, I told my mom I wanted to be an actor, and she said, "Amazing, you found something then that you might you might actually be like successful." So I thought it was like a job, and I went to a 7-Eleven and I picked up this thing called the Ross Reports, where they used to have where like agents and managers are located.
Yes.
And I took the train into Manhattan, and I got very lucky that I walked into an agent's office and I told him I wanted to be an actor because I needed a job. This is like pre-internet, I guess, or probably like 1999.
Yeah, if it was the Ross Reports, then it's probably pre-internet.
Pre-social media. And he said, do you have a headshot? And I didn't know what a headshot was. And so he said, I said, I didn't know what a headshot was. He goes, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you these sides. I didn't know what sides were either. He gave me the scene for Marlon Brando on the waterfront, like I could have been a contender, the very famous scene. Yes. And he said, I'll give you 5 minutes with this, break this down and come back to my office. So I did the best that I could to work on it instinctually. And I got very lucky. I signed right away. And MTV at the time was doing this thing called I Spy Video, which was like these improv games. It was like this really bad TV show where we would do like truth or dare stuff.
I was at MTV from like 97 to 2001, I believe.
Oh wow!
Do you remember that? That was Dave Holmes.
Yes, of course. I think. Yeah, I knew Dave.
And so they kind of signed me. I guess they didn't know what they were doing because they signed me. And I told them, you know, I like conned my way in. And my first audition was for Spike Lee for what was this movie? Summer of Sam. And I got that, and then I got that MTV gig. That was like a 6-month gig. And so it was kind of interesting. I'd never studied acting, and I had booked a couple other films back to back. And so I got really lucky. Wow. And that's how I got into it. And long story short, I eventually started studying theater at Queens College, and then I went to film school. And when I moved to LA, I crashed an audition for series regular and booked it. And that's how I met Michael Eisner. So I've always had this very
you crashed the audition? Like you just kind of barged in there without?
No. My friend that worked, I had a friend that said, you'd be really good for this audition. I didn't have an agent and manager. And he said, you should just go. And I remember, if anyone here is an actor, don't do this. Please don't do this. I literally just went, and I went cold in the room, and I just was like, I just winged it, and I booked it. And I didn't even have an agent or manager to do my contracts, but it was interesting. And so I will say, honestly, I just got really, really lucky. And I think somewhere there's like a little bit of talent there, and that's what's kept me going. But I do study my ass off to this day, you know.
And I think it's great too that you kind of did the college and the film school after you start, like one of the questions I have coming up is kind of a lot of our kids aren't sure what to do after high school, like they don't, those decisions, it's a lot of decisions to make. So it's kind of nice that you took a little time before you kind of figured it out.
Well, I suffer, I don't know if I still do. I sometimes I used to suffer from like imposter syndrome, and I was, and because you're on set, you're being directed by Spike Lee, and 2 months before you're working. I think I was working at a restaurant, kind of like being like this gopher kid in the kitchen, and doing like stock work at
Absolutely.
I think I worked at I had so many jobs and I just felt like what happened was Spike Lee kind of yelled at me. For anyone that doesn't know what this means, it's called MOS. It means meet without sound, which basically is without sound. And so on one take, he said, do this. He told his assistant director, little X, to tell me to do it MOS. And I just kept doing louder and louder and louder. And he got really upset. He's like, you don't know what it is, right? I go, no. And he's like, oh, you should have said something. And then another actor said, who I really loved and admire, he goes like, dude, you're in my light. Like, learn how to, like, where your light is. Gotcha. I didn't know anything. And so what I did was I went to Queens College for theater, and then I went to film school. But to get into film school, I did like a 3-month PA job. And I just went to one of those Gotham writers workshops. Mm-hmm. I met a screenwriter there, and he was producing in India, and I said, I'll do whatever I can do as a PA for free. So I worked for 3 months, like picking up actors and extras, and I did that, and that was like my only credential to get into film school.
That's great though.
But I think doing it from the ground up, and I do think there's those who teach and those that do it, but I do think that there's those who teach and do it also. And I think, I'm not necessarily the best teacher, but I can't sometimes put into words what acting is sometimes. I just kind of like, I guess because I've entered it from a very different way, I just always saw it as a business, and this is how I make a living. And I've been doing this, like, knock on wood, since I was like, I don't know, for a long time now, just strictly this. But I do think education is so important. Like, you have to take, sometimes like those 10 steps back to go those 20 steps forward. And so I'm like a big advocate of education. Even now, I like to challenge myself too, as much as possible.
That's awesome.
So,
I like that I think a lot of entertainers' paths are not so direct. And I think that's great, because I work a lot with high school kids, and they're very anxious about what their choices are and what they're going to do next, and where should they go to college and what should they study. And I'm just like, dude, you're 17.
Right.
You have the world ahead of you. Like, there's lots of time. You'll figure it out, So I like that kind of all of us have like kind of wacky paths, because I think that helps them calm down about their choice issues.
I think it's interesting, right? Like, there's like, you can go like with this industry, like I know a lot of actors that are very academic, and there's a lot of actors that
more visceral, kind of just intuitive.
I tend to be more like on the intuitive side of things. But I do think like there's people that have had like their head on their shoulders from a younger age. I probably would have applied to or tried to audition for Juilliard, or Yale or something like this, or Carnegie Mellon, but I didn't know that I wanted to be an actor. I didn't have a
Right.
set
And there's
path.
also there's a class thing, I assume, going on too, right? Because like if you had parents who were in the industry or who knew of the industry, like, you know, I grew up working class immigrant parents, like they didn't know. Like I remember I got a job at Nickelodeon and most of my neighborhood was like, you're working at the diner on Steinway? And I was like, no, it's a cable television channel. Like they had never heard of it. Like you just had no idea, right? They thought it was the diner. The diner on Steinway at the time was called Nickelodeon, right? So you know, I think that has a lot to do with it too. Like if your family's in the know, they can help you with that path.
Yeah, it's definitely like, you kind of like, you kind of have to sometimes like, it's not a competition with anyone else. It's just a competition with me. Sometimes I'm like, I want to always grow and be better and do better. And, I don't take time to smell the roses, but I think, accepting like where you are, I think is a big thing for me, because sometimes I go, wow, I'm really proud of myself. Like I didn't have like handouts. I didn't have like nepotism anywhere. Yeah. I moved to LA with nothing. And then I moved back. It's funny, I moved to LA with nothing. And then I kind of decided to take a break and just study and move back to New York. And my wife and I moved to New York like in 2017 with like nothing, no agents, no man, nothing. I had some credits, but then it was like to rebuild again in New York and to do, it's interesting. You just have to, I think I just have to work that much harder than the next person. And yeah, I'm very, very fortunate to be where I am. So my company,
keep working.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been my mantra. Just keep working, no matter what. Do the next thing, do the next thing, do the next thing. Keep working, keep planning.
If I might intercede for 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't help. So what I always tell young people is don't sit around waiting for the phone to ring. There's always something to do. You create a project if you're not in one.
Yep,
find some,
absolutely.
Get together with a friend and put on a show. Now you're working. So there's no reason to sit around and wait for somebody to want you. You have to generate yourself. Yeah.
Fully agree.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off of that is just like, yeah, the more you create projects with your friends, like one of the best things we in LA, I'm part of a theater company called the Urban Theater Movement, and we were doing these small little plays, and then we did our first feature film as a theater company. We decided to do this play that ran for like 10 years in LA, and we sent the script to Mickey Rourke. He loved it, and now we just finished the cut like 2 days ago. So it's just one of those things where it's just like,
yeah, you just have to keep churning, keep it churning.
Yeah, I don't like to get stuck on like accolades and because you can believe your own hype, you know what I mean? Like you can really like, you can feel yourself too much and you're like, all right, no, this is.
What was it? I just watched an interview and I'm going to forget with who, where they said, with fame is like a rental car, it could be taken away at any time. So like pretend you're taking your fame for a drive and you're going to have to return it to the lot at some point, because it's very temporary.
Yeah. Oh, it's very tough. It's very tough. I had a 6-year contract with Marvel, and right before COVID, we like when COVID hit, we were going to do a deal. They were going to do a deal with Disney Plus, and then it didn't happen. And it was just like, oh my God, reality. No, I think the weirdest thing, it was like I was on a show. We only did 2 seasons, but I remember when I came back to New York after season 1, we had like right there, I think it was like the Avengers Endgame. They like invited us to go there, and it was like at the red carpet, and I got interviewed right before Robert Downey Jr. And I go, holy shit, pardon my French. I was like, this is not happening. This is so weird to be doing this, right? And I remember immediately, like some of the other cast members on the show were like, hey, we're going to go to like Tahiti. I'm going to go to like, Europe for 2 months or 3 months and just come back for season 2. And I said, no, immediately I have to look for a gig where I can do something. I don't care about money. And I did this really cool play in the Lower East Side. I got paid nothing for it, and there was like no dressing rooms, and I was just like, this is like my comfort zone. This is where I need to be always as an artist, you know.
Yep.
And make it about the work. So I would like tell any high school kid, just make it about the work and don't get too crazy about it.
Yeah. Easier said than done, but definitely good advice. Geneva, how did you kind of get into the business?
Well, I'd always been, I think, fascinated with storytelling. And I think in my own way, a bit of a storyteller ever since I was a kid. I was very curious and in my imagination, and grew up in the arts. My mom was a single parent of 3, and we didn't really have a lot of financial resources. You know, we were definitely supported. We were on welfare for a while, and somehow she just always made it work and had these people around her, like a really great community of people that had resources, or like were extended community, of course. And
were you put in dance school by any chance? I feel like all of us working class kids who had any creative instinct at all were put in dance, because that's all that was available like back 20 plus years ago. If you were in a certain
I wanted to go in ballet, but my mom couldn't afford it. And that was like even in school. And the alternative was I grew up in Canada. I played ringette, which was inexpensive. Ringette is like hockey.
I would say you have to translate.
Yeah, I was a left wing. I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
And I got, hand-me-down equipment. So it worked out to be, financially more feasible for my mom. And, I was like curious and doing art classes, meaning like drawing and painting. And I think because of my background of being very mixed in different, in different areas, and growing up with not a lot of, without having access to a lot of financial means, the community my mom had around me, because she was a single parent, she made sure that I had like, I call it like a council of goddess women. I had like women from all different walks of life around me.
That's awesome. So
I learned about different communities and felt like I had access to different communities. And I think I just really I saw at an early age the importance of everyone being the same value, and that everyone deserved to be seen.
Yes.
And
which speaks a lot to the work you've been doing.
Yeah. And I just, I wanted to spread love, like we all need it. We all deserve it. And in my early 20s, I was actually living in Ottawa, and I went to school for television broadcasting production. I applied to get into the full-time program, didn't get in because they had only a small amount of applicants that they were taking. So I did it part-time, and the opportunity to come and move to Toronto at the time came. And I asked one of my teachers, I was like, should I move to Toronto and get into the film world, or should I stay and finish the program? And at the time I thought I wanted to be in front of the camera. I wanted to be like a Much Music VJ, which is like our MTV, but I wanted to do it for Rap City.
Yes.
Yes. But I learned very quickly, I love behind the scenes. I'm really shy. And my teacher was like, you can finish the program. And I don't advise this, but he's like, you can finish the program and you'll start at the bottom, or you can go to Toronto and you can start at the bottom. And I went to Toronto, and SARS broke out.
Oh gosh. Yes.
So there was no work. And I ended up working at a hotel for quite a while. But that, interestingly enough, led me to my first job in media. I worked as an executive assistant in feature animation to 2 directors, 1 executive producer, a floor manager, and I think 2 producers. I was like doing the job.
So had you met them at the hotel?
I did.
That's crazy.
One of the producers was like, my assistant's leaving. You've been great. I'd love for you to apply for the job. And I applied for the job, and I just really realized that creating didn't have to be painting and drawing, which is something I had left behind. Mm-hmm. And so I came back into seeing like storytelling and magic being made through animation, and created an animated series on my own, being inspired while I was there, called Libby. And always wanted to move to New York. So I ended up deciding to move to New York, and I really wanted to follow my dreams and follow my joy. And I moved here about 12 years ago, and I started pitching Libby to the major networks, and I'd never done anything like that before.
Wow.
I really hustled hard, and people were kind of like, how did you get my email? How'd you get my number? I was like, I don't know. And I had a lot of really great.
How did you get their email and their number?
I had great friends that really believed in me and felt that it should be a series that was on TV. It was loosely based on me. So like a mixed young girl, but she grew up in New York. And I stepped away from it for a little bit, but I'm pushing it. But it was before we were really seeing, a variety of ethnicities,
any representation at all outside of the norm. Yeah.
So it's like,
the so-called norm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of, I got some really great, I almost went into development with NBC Sprout.
Sure.
And that was really exciting. And I think as was mentioned earlier, Mark was talking to, but you get so close and you're just like, oh my God, it's going to happen. And then it doesn't fall through, and it's okay. I think for me, I always look at it as timing. And I didn't really realize how Libby and creating the series had been something I'd never done before. And it brought me to a place of understanding how to wow, I created a full animated Bible, right? An animated series, and I'd never done that before. And it set me up to be ready to have the confidence to move on and conceptualize other things. And, I soon after that, when I moved to New York, the day after I moved to New York, I started babysitting a young, amazing girl, which
which is how we met. I know the girl.
Yeah.
And then you did
Emma.
a beautiful documentary about her.
Yeah.
Which she did with you. And she's non-speaking autistic, as is my son. So I had known about her, and then had been following closely as she started to learn to type and communicate. And so, Geneva's film won Audience Award and also the Zukor Award for that. And then the following year was the Women's series, right?
Women's series, yeah. So I started working on Unspoken, which is the film about Emma, by Emma. She co-directed the film. We started when she was 12, and that was really important for me. And I really look back and see that a lot of the stuff that I worked on is things that are very personal for me in some way, shape, or form, whether they're directly in my community or extended community. And, Emma, it was a personal story. And I think one of the things that I understood too was that, as being a woman of color, a Black woman, what it looks like when other people are telling your narrative. And for us to move past, fear and judgment, we have to create space, for people to communicate on their own, whatever form of communication that might be. So it was important for Emma to co-direct, and she also had final sign off on the film. And I think to date, that's the project that I'm the most proud of and always will be, because of, I feel it's like a gift, she's really kind of given the world. And that's
definitely helped me a lot. And there's been other films that have followed, but yours was the first that kind of brought attention to non-speaking autistics who type to communicate. And in trying to kind of fight for my own son's rights to an education, I use that film often to tell people hey, this is happening. It's not in my head. It's not me as a parent seeing more than is there. It's actually what's happening. So
thank you.
It's been very helpful.
That was the point of it, right? And it's available in schools across North America. And that's the point, is that it can go and the story be shared with students, but also teachers and people that design curriculum, so that we can open their minds and hearts, and they can make the change that needs to be made, because schools are extremely segregated. So
I could go on for another hour on that topic. Yes.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I'm constantly fighting for his right to an education. So
wow.
They just, in a nutshell, basically, they still see non-speaking autistic children as intellectually deficient, and that isn't always the case. Often it's not the case. It's a motor control issue, that there's a speech problem. So if you teach them to type, it's one finger usually. Sometimes they can communicate. But there's just such a stereotype and hangover from what schools thought previously, that it's really hard to get them to, so that, they won't teach them anything but the alphabet and colors for their entire career till they're 21. Then they're out, and then they're like, oh, look, these kids can't learn. It's like, no, you taught them nothing. You literally never tried to teach them anything. So it's an ongoing fight. So that's why I homeschool. But anyway, moving right along.
There's a real focus on, I think, which is the miss, is an assumption of your level of verbal language indicating your intelligence.
Absolutely.
And there are so many different ways of communicating, whether it's through sign, whether it's through typing, whether it's through body language, whether it's, energetically, whatever it is. We've come to a place in our society where we think that verbal communication is like the top, and it's not. And I think like Unspoken was something that really taught me the importance of collaborative filmmaking and creating space and holding space for other people to tell their stories authentically in a very safe and supportive, loving way. And that's how I've decided to move forward with everything I make. And, I made the women's series, which was amazing. And it was, 12 very different women. And we started in 2016. And it was like amplifying, the stories of extraordinary everyday women, right? Like, you are enough and you are extraordinary and you should be celebrated. And then there's like a toolkit created with that so that people can watch it or listen on as a podcast and create conversation and start talking to one another and actually start seeing, feeling, hearing, one another. And then the last 2 years, I've been working on some content, like whether it's commercial or branded, and I've been able to bring that, like that, the lens that I have in that area of it being collaborative. And I've worked on, like 2 years ago, I worked with Adobe and Complex on a 5-part series highlighting 5 Black creatives, and that was my second campaign. And was really excited. We were nominated for Shorty and we won gold in audience. And it's just I've just really loved being in that space and kind of, even if it's a small way, being a part of bringing heart and like additional heart and collaborative storytelling to that area, or like how I work. Because for me, it's also not just like in front of the camera, but it's also behind the camera and like, talking to your team and like maybe, seeing if we're missing anything or if anybody wants to add a question or anything like that. That's really, really, really important for me. And yeah, so I kind of find myself in a space right now of really just wanting to continue to follow my joy. And my joy is creating space for people to be seen, heard, and celebrated.
Well, when I was a kid, my dad and my uncle always had cameras in their hands. So just growing up, there was always pictures everywhere. When I went to college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I actually went to college for computer science, like programming.
Which makes a lot of sense with what you're doing.
Yeah, but programming is actually not what I wanted to do at all. I hated it. I did not want to do this at all. And I ended up spending a whole year trying to switch majors to film video animation, which is what I ended up getting my degree in. And then, so that was a lot of fun. I liked it. My parents weren't thrilled, but I liked it. And then I moved to New York City 10 days after 9/11. And that was, it was very, very difficult to try to get any kind of job in New York City to begin with, in media, and especially for a young Arab American man, it was very
right, because you had just moved. You're originally from Egypt.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So I got a job fixing printers in downtown, of all places, and I was fixing printers for maybe like 6 months, and then one day I went through the newspaper, and Technicolor had a job opening for a junior engineer, and I applied, and I remember thinking they're never gonna hire me. Well, they're never gonna take me, and sure enough, I got a call back, and I went, and next thing you know, I got hired as a junior engineer. And my job was to fix the telecine machines, to not fix, but to clean telecine machines. And that sort of started my career into engineering. And while I had that as my real job that was paying my bills, I was making movies on the side. So I also like doing documentaries a lot, for one reason, and that's you don't have to rely on actors.
I think that's what Chung Gee was saying. It's definitely something you can do more, with less people.
Yeah. So I ended up making a few different documentaries. A lot of them seem to center around, sort of my homeland, my home country where I grew up. So one movie I made was about taxi drivers in Cairo, and the idea was, if there's any sort of segment of the population that gets to meet the entire population, it's cab drivers. You can either ferry a rich person or a poor person, and they both get in your cab, and everybody has a story. And so I did a documentary on that, and then I also did a documentary about the Egyptian Revolution in 2011, and actually won Best Film at the Queen's Film Festival in 2015.
Yeah.
So I know these guys really well. I live in Jackson Heights, so
great.
But that's really how I got into filmmaking, but just combining my love of photography, and when I got to college, I was like, I can't do programming all day long for the rest of my life.
Right.
It's not I can't. It's not. So, yeah.
Well, editing has a similar, it obviously different subject matter, but it's a similar overall vibe, right? It's very attention to detail. There's a lot of things you need to know that aren't obvious to other people. So it's kind of feels similar, but obviously very different. Mike, sorry, I want everybody to know I had like 5 questions. We've been through one. So
this is fascinating, and like you say, everyone has a different path to where they are now, to where they're going. So this has been really interesting for me as well, just to listen and hear people's stories. I grew up in a very small town in England, kind of a million miles away from what I thought of Hollywood and filmmaking and things like that. So I started in theatre, went to university, started directing more kind of through my years at university. Graduated, took a couple of small acting jobs here and there, and then started assistant directing for directing directors who are working on some Shakespeare plays, some kind of classical texts, and I thought that was going to be my path, really. I ended up as a resident director at a large regional theatre in England, running their youth theatre programs. So we had, I think in the end, around 200 young people from kind of 2 to 21.
There's a range.
It is a range. I was not doing the kind of pre-K kind of younger kids with the work there. But yeah, I was directing musicals. I was directing kind of classical plays. I was devising new work in kind of site-specific spaces. With mainly my work was kind of, ages of 13 to 18. And also a lot of work with kind of inclusive theatre practice. So how do we make our workshops and our rehearsals inclusive, regardless of physical ability, whatever your situation is, you are welcome, and this work is accessible to you, and you can participate. So that was kind of where I thought my career was headed. And then 2010, moved to New York, started working for a producer who had some shows on Broadway, was also doing a lot of TV and film, and we were developing a script that we ended up shooting in Toronto for 3 months. And one day he just said to me, you're gonna go to Toronto, you're gonna learn about films because we're doing this film. So off you go, pack your bags, see you in a couple of months.
Wow.
And that was my first kind of foray onto a film set.
So you just got thrown into the deep end, basically.
Right into the deep end, and very aware of just how lucky that is to be kind of thrown into that position. And the first AD on that film gave me a headset, gave me the earpiece, and just said, all right, listen, you don't know anything that's going on, listen. So I did. I spent 2 or 3 months just listening to every single department, every single conversation that was happening, figuring out, okay, that's who does that thing. That's why that image looks the way it does. And that was really a kind of eye-opening moment for me. So I got back from Toronto. He then sent me to Atlanta for 2 months to do another film.
Wow. This sounds wonderful.
It was, I mean, I never went to film school. I never, I don't have a master's or anything like that. This was really my education in film.
Yes.
So with this kind of on-set experience, we were still also kind of developing scripts, and I was writing coverage of books that could be interesting for developing into series and things like that. But did these 2 films, came back and bought myself a camera, like as much camera as I could afford at the time, which was still not much, but it was something. And kind of roped some friends into making some stuff. And when I got to a point where I didn't know what to do, I would Google it and I'd watch the YouTube videos.
That's been a huge benefit. During COVID, I've taught myself a lot more about editing than I ever knew just from YouTube. Yeah.
Same. I had no idea how to do it. I just watched everything on YouTube, taught myself how to edit. And yeah, if I didn't know someone who would, do a particular role for free, then I would figure it out myself, or,
Yes.
So that was kind of how I got started in film, and then eventually went freelance, I think back in 2015. And when people would say, hey, I'm looking for someone who could film this thing, I'd just say, yep, I can do that. And if I didn't know, I would Google it.
Figure it out. Yes.
Which I don't necessarily recommend, but
I do highly recommend. Fake it till you make it, I think should be everybody's MO. Like it's because then you're willing to take risks, you're willing to take on new projects. And the thing is, I always try to tell the kids, like, it's all jargon. Like once you figure out the jargon, like you're intimidated because you don't yet know the jargon, but 3 months you'll know the jargon, and then you'll be a lot more comfortable. Yeah. So just dive in there, right?
Exactly,
like, why not?
Exactly. So I think, started to find those scripts and those stories that really interested me, started making some short films. Someone had an idea for a web series. So I said, yes, let's make that. And we'll put that out and see if anyone's interested in this kind of thing. And that kind of really started the kind of development of my company, Evening Squire Productions. We do a lot of, short films, kind of web content. I also freelance in the kind of corporate world and the branded world and commercial stuff.
It's always useful.
Always useful. And now currently working on our first feature film. So we're developing a feature script now to shoot in the fall.
What's the feature about?
It is a friend reunion, that kind of mid to late 30s, the state of the world, I guess, some of the stuff that we've lived through and how we kind of reconnect with our past in order to kind of ignite our future in a way. So yeah.
No cannibals?
Not in this one. So, okay. So what I have realized is I've done a lot of very kind of varied work, I think. Most recently at the Astoria Film Festival, a short film called Cook with the Heart, which was a mockumentary about a young millennial woman who is one of the 1.6% of millennials who have turned to ethical cannibalism as a form of kind of sustainable food. Because we have an overpopulation issue, climate change is killing the planet. So what if we ate each other? It's very funny. It's kind of dark.
It's brilliant.
But there is there's a kind of a heart running through it, and a kind of, an honesty and a truth in there. And I'm really interested in that kind of work. So we create real characters with very interesting people. And then maybe we just turn things up, to 11, or just get them a little off kilter, but
just a bit.
Just a little. I mean, look, just.
Yeah, but hey, it's never say never.
So yeah, I think, and again, hearing kind of other people's stories, just a lot of kind of varied work. And we're out there, we're saying yes to opportunity. We're also trying to work to create more opportunity, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us and for our networks and our communities. And again, I really thank you, Nina, for kind of the work that you're doing, promoting the arts and accessibility to the arts. I think is so important for for all of us. So yeah, thank you again for that.
Well, I appreciate you guys, or else I'd just be up here, I don't know, talking to myself. So it's been an honor really to get to know all of you. So I appreciate that. Before we turn it over to the audience, I guess I would jump down to, if you could go back to, if there's one piece of advice that you got that you would like to pass on, or if you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give them some kind of advice, what would that advice be? You want to start, Mike? Sorry.
Sure. I would say don't wait. You have a voice.
Yes.
Go and use your voice. Don't forget to listen. Like always be listening. But we will always, it's very easy to wait for that next camera to come out. Or if I had a bit more money, I could spend it, on costume, or, I just need the right location. There's always something to wait for. I would say, look at what you have and make something with what you have.
I love that.
Yeah, don't wait.
Yeah, everybody looking for that perfect time. That perfect time is never happening.
Exactly.
Never happening.
And while you're waiting for the perfect time, someone else is out there making it, and then they take that step forward in their career. And while it's not a race, as we've all been saying, you want to get to a place. So you can either wait for it to be perfect, or you can take that first step, and that puts you one step closer. So I would remind my younger self, keep working, take that first step. Don't wait.
That's great. Jaime, do you want to weigh in on what's your favorite piece of advice to younger people, or to your younger self? What would be your advice?
Well, my answer is kind of what Mike kind of said, but like, I would almost voice it to like younger people, but like anyone of all ages, because no matter what, right? Like human emotions, like we're like roller coasters, right? And so I think, just to add on to what Mike said, I think is don't forget to just kind of go for it. Because I think, a lot of established artists, or even younger people, they get success, and then they get comfortable in there. And like you had said, it could be like a rental car and it's gone. And then you have to constantly, I think it's a constant fight with idealism. Like you have to just kind of move forward and kind of like not care, and just like whatever enlivens you as an artist, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else.
Yes.
It's healthy, because my younger self, I think I commend my younger self for being, for having the chutzpah to just kind of go out there and, make it. And I don't know if I made it, but I'm still just hustling like everyone else. But I think I remember going to California, and my father said, why don't you just get like a job and like save money and do it the right way? And random story, but I met Woody Allen on the street and on the Upper West Side at a restaurant I was working at. And I took that as a sign to quit and move to LA. Why I didn't stay in New York, I don't know. But I moved to LA with like $400, and I knew I had a friend from college, and he said, you could crash on my floor because the room's already rented, the spare room. He goes, so I'll rent you my floor.
Oh,
and I lived on I slept on his floor for like, I don't know, like a year. And
wow.
You do forget though, you get too comfortable. So for me, it's a constant reminder of like, I don't want to say ignorance is bliss, but like, I shouldn't even be here with you guys. I should be somewhere else. Like, if I didn't have that kind of energy of just kind of going for it. And there's many highs in your career, especially for these young kids, that, you get success really fast. And then there's those low periods where nothing's happening.
Yes.
And I think we have to remember to just keep a positive attitude, and just don't get so involved in yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like you have to maintain the balance, because the industry is going to be highs and lows. Geneva, your advice, your best piece of advice that you'd like to give to anyone, or that was given to you?
I've been given a lot of great advice over the years, but I think one of the things that I'm really sitting with right now is, I think especially in this like current, world that we're in, is the importance of rest. And I think also like being in this industry, and like if you're in New York and there's that hustle mentality, and I think the hustle mentality is great, but don't burn yourself out. And there's so much rejuvenation in playing, in finding your joy, and making sure you have time carved out for that, for travel, for time with family, for time with friends, and you'll keep yourself replenished and inspired, right?
Yes.
I think that's something that really just resonates with me right now. I think I would probably follow in the footsteps of my mom. I think my mom was always just very optimistic in the sense of like, she really believed in me, and she really communicated that to me at all times, and like still does, when you go through moments of like, oh my God, what is happening? What am I doing?
And that happens, by the way, you never quite don't have that. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. Right. So I think you're always going through that throughout life, but yes, sorry.
Yeah. It's lining yourself up or finding really great mentors. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think mentors in different places, different like of the career that you, or the dream that you have, is a really important thing. And that has been really helpful for me.
And also just realizing, like, even if you make the wrong choice in what you want to do, you can change your mind and do something else, right? Like, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to do it, because you might fail. Like, do it, try it. If it doesn't work, by the time you're like 40, you don't even have to put half the stuff on your resume that you did do. Just put the stuff that you want. Like you have like 5 different resumes anyway. Oh, this is my education resume. This is my communications resume. This is my like production resume. So I think it's hard to see it when you're young, but you have plenty of time. You can make mistakes. You can do many different paths. Like, now's the time to try out what you like and not be so worried. Obviously, I always had to support myself financially. So like, I would always do I was teaching Pilates, I was teaching yoga, I was doing film production, I was, doing after school education all at the same time, because I was constantly terrified of not being able to, pay things just because of my upbringing. But, and I still kind of do that actually. But, I think youth is that, in your 20s and even 30s, like, it's the time to just try stuff out, because people are okay with you trying it out and getting it wrong. And even now, like, I still try it out and get it wrong. So I think losing kind of that fear of what people might think about you it's really hard, but it's really crucial to your future. Anyone else want to throw in their 2 cents? Sorry, I went on about that.
I think maybe just to add, whatever that big dream is, kind of work backwards from there a little bit. And I don't know, I want to direct a $300 million action film. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? What do I like about the work I'm doing? Well, I like working with a group of people to make something fun. Okay, well, we can do that. We can do that with the resources we have. We can do that with the people that we know. We can find that tribe, that network, that kind of group of people. And by doing the work, if you enjoy the work and you enjoy the people you're working with, that can be enough. And that will lead you to the next thing, and that will lead you to the slightly bigger thing. So I think don't feel overwhelmed by the big dream. I think the big dream will come, and the big dream, like you're saying, will change.
Like a deconstruct your dream.
Absolutely.
That's really helpful, actually. I do.
So thank you, everybody, so much. My pleasure. And I will be in touch with you guys soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us.